Let's talk about running backs that you should start, or more importantly, sit heading into week 4 of the fantasy football season. We'll go through all 32 teams, 16 matchups in total. This will be your complete guide for the running back position here in week 4. Let's start off with Thursday night football. We've got Cowboys at Giants, two 1-2 teams wanting to get back on the right track. Over under is 43.5 points. The Cowboys are heavily favored. New York is 4.5 point underdogs in this game. Let's start with the New York Giants. I mean, look, I'm not overly excited to start any running back in this matchup. Devin Singletary is the one that I feel the most comfortable to start. Currently, the RB15 in fantasy football, averaging just over 14 points per game. Sneaky upside versus the Cowboys, who currently give up the most points to fantasy running backs. And that was even before last week when Derrick Henry went absolutely nuclear. So look, my RB26 on the week, I think you can play him if you'd like to. For the Cowboys side of the ball, this is a middle of the pack matchup versus the Giants. Rico Dowdle is a spot start, my RB34. Am I excited to start Rico? No, I'm not excited to start a guy who hasn't even had over 10 PPR points, but he is getting more work than Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott's snap percentage has gone down every week since week 1 from 51% to 40% to 19%. So we could see Rico Dowdle take over potentially this game. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, let's move on to the second matchup here, which is Saints at Falcons. This is the start of the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time slate of games. Of course, you're going to start Alvin Kamara. I'm not going to waste time talking about him. One of my guys this year who is absolutely popping off. And of course, you're going to start Bijan Robinson, okay? You guys drafted Bijan in the first round. Alvin Kamara looks like a league winner. Divisional game, anything could happen, but there's not really a roster out there where you don't start those two names. I think you guys know that. All right, the third matchup we will look at is the Bengals at the Packers. The Bengals now 0-3. Guys, the Carolina Panthers have a better record than the Cincinnati Bengals. Wow, I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth. But Zach Moss has a great matchup ahead of him. The Panthers are 6th in points allowed to fantasy running backs. He's coming off a 20-point game versus the Washington Commanders. He's still very clearly the workhorse for this team over Chase Brown. He is a must-start for me. And then Chuba Hubbard, I think he's definitely in play. Look, I don't expect the Panthers to be as good offensively this week as they were last week. That's ridiculous to have that kind of expectation, but Chuba Hubbard is getting the work. He had 26 touches last week in this new offense. He's the RB18 on the year. Miles Sanders is not a problem. And we saw what Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson were able to do against the Cincinnati run defense last week. So Chuba's definitely in play if you need a spot start. All right, the fourth matchup we will look at is the Rams at the Bears. Two teams who are, again, 1-2. Can't believe the Rams beat the 49ers last week, but that's why they play the game. 40.5 point over under. The Bears are favored at home. Kyren Williams remains a must start. He had 3 touchdowns last week. He had 2 touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. The dude is a touchdown machine. San Francisco did not look like a good matchup for him. He is matchup proof. He's used in the air. He's used on the ground. Anytime they're on the goal line, it's Kyren Williams time. So he absolutely has to be in your lineup. And as far as the Bears go, I don't personally know how you start any name. I know the Rams are a good matchup. They're top 7 in points allowed to running backs. But how the hell are you supposed to start DeAndre Swift? Guys, last week versus the Colts, that was a cupcake matchup. And DeAndre Swift averaged 1.5 yards per attempt. This season, DeAndre Swift is averaging 1.8 yards per attempt. How the hell are you supposed to start him? He's not even like the 3rd or 4th best target in this offense. Rashawn Johnson is getting more and more work. He played 37% of the snaps last week. He was used in passing scenarios. So even in PPR formats, DeAndre Swift has such a limited ceiling. I can't start him. Maybe you have to. The 5th matchup we will look at here is the Vikings at the Packers. Divisional game. I love this time of the year. So let's see what happens. But 43.5 point over under. Even though the Vikings are undefeated, the Packers are favored at home. Tough to go into Lambeau and get a win. I understand that. Packers are giving up the 12th most points to fantasy running backs. Aaron Jones is coming off a huge week, 25.8 fantasy points. He overcame a really difficult matchup versus the Houston Texans rush defense. He's 100,000% in play. The RB9 on the week thus far. You gotta get him in your lineups. My RB14 on the week. Now, as far as the Packers go, hopefully for Josh Jacobs' sake, Jordan Love is finally back and healthy and commanding this offense. Otherwise, just the weapons in this offense in general might be quite limited for fantasy football potential. But Still, Josh Jacobs is a must start. I know Emmanuel Wilson had a really good game last week, but you have to think about it. Versus the Tennessee Titans, there really wasn't a point in this game where they needed to play Jacobs. Jacobs was coming off a 32 attempt game in week 2. Maybe they wanted to give him, a little bit of rest, but I still think Jacobs is in play for sure. All right, the sixth matchup we will look at is the Jags at the Texans. The Jags look like one of the worst teams in the NFL right now, but Travis Etienne is definitely still a name that you can start. On Monday Night Football, he ended up with 17 touches, 6 targets through the air. This offense has got to figure out what the hell they want to do, but Travis Etienne is clearly going to be a focal point of that offense. On the other side, let's hope that Joe Mixon is playing. He's day-to-day with the ankle. We'll find out more as practice reports come out. Of course, if Joe Mixon plays, you're going to start him in every single league. But if he is out, I think Cam Akers is a spot start. My RB29, that's only if Joe Mixon doesn't play. If Mixon plays, of course, you can't start Cam Akers. But last week, you got to think about it. Tough matchup. He caught the touchdown through the air. But the Texans really had no control of that game at any point throughout the entire matchup. Now they're facing the Jags, who might be the worst team in the NFL right now, with no disrespect intended, but definitely Cam Akers is a spot start if you need him, if Joe Mixon is out. All right, the seventh matchup we will look at here is the Steelers at the Colts. Okay, Najee Harris is a fine option heading into week number 4. Last week on a run-focused offense, Najee Harris had 23 total touches, including 5 targets, and now Jaylen Warren is dealing with a knee injury. We could see Najee Harris out there, again, 60, 70% of the snaps, multiple targets through the air, in a good matchup versus the Colts. I like Najee Harris this week. As far as the Colts themselves, you obviously are going to start Jonathan Taylor, but you should drastically limit your expectations because the Steelers are 31st in points allowed, meaning they are the second most difficult matchup for your running back. But of course, the guy who just scored 2 touchdowns over 110 yards versus Chicago and Jonathan Taylor, you're not going to sit that guy, are you? We all know the dealio there. By the way, second lowest over-under of the week. I think this should be the lowest over-under, but it's the second lowest over-under. Only 38.5 points are expected in this one. So this could be a snooze fest, but for fantasy purposes, hopefully I'm wrong. All right, the eighth matchup we will look at is the Broncos at the Jets, 38.5 point over-under. The Jets are heavily favored, despite Bo Nix's impressive performance last week versus the Bucs. New York are 7.5 point favorites in this game. And I'll be honest, there's not a single Broncos running back. Honestly, take the clip that I said last week about the Broncos and just insert it right here in this segment. Again, I have no interest at all in this backfield. I don't think I ever will. Certainly not this year. Javonte, great. 6 points last week. Not someone that you can start. Jaleel McLaughlin, barely involved. Then they started using Tyler Beatty, and the announcer was saying Bidet for some reason. It's just, you can't start any of these names. I mean, what if we get Blake Watson involved? I mean, it's just not an enticing backfield whatsoever, and it's not a good matchup. For the other side, Breece Hall definitely in play. I did label Braylon Allen a must-sit just because I'm more thinking like 10-man leagues. But look, if you're in a 14-team league and you have deep plays out there, Braylon Allen is totally in play. This is not that good of a run defense, and Braylon Allen is consistently getting involved. 14 touches last week, and his role keeps growing and growing. All right, the ninth matchup we will look at. This is a rematch from last year's playoff, Eagles at Bucs. These are both 2-1 teams. The Saints barely got the win last week. This is tied for the third highest over-under of the week. Saquon Barkley, the RB1 in fantasy football. You're playing Saquon Barkley. Now, how about the opposite side of the ball? Things are getting really messy. Number one, this is not a good matchup. The Eagles' rush defense is very good. They are 22nd in points allowed to fantasy running backs. And Rachaad White is slowly kind of losing his juice. He's losing morale. He's losing any reason to keep him in this role as the RB1. It should be a split backfield at this point. We're talking about a guy in Rachaad White who hasn't averaged over 3 yards per carry in any game this season, averaging around 2.5 yards per carry on the year. And you got a guy like Bucky Irving who averaged over 7 yards per carry last week. In week 1, almost 7 yards per carry again versus Washington. Bucky Irving looks dynamic. He looks explosive. I know Rachaad White injured his groin last week. Not during the game, but in practice, and then he still played. But still, I mean, even the coaches are coming out and saying Bucky has earned more snaps. So Rachaad White is no longer a must start every week. He is a spot start. And if it's the right matchup, you can play him. I don't think this is the right matchup, but of course, if you're in a deeper format, you got to just throw him out there and hope for the best. But don't be surprised if Bucky Irving gets like 40% of the snaps and it's equal volume. I mean, I certainly think it's possible with the way Bucky's playing and with the way Rachaad White is disappointing us. All right, the 10th matchup we will look at. This is the start of the afternoon slate of games. All right, Commanders at Cardinals. How about your boy, Jaden Daniels, my guy, killing it in the National Football League? Looks like the best quarterback of the rookies. Am I biased? Absolutely, I'm biased. I love Jaden Daniels, but it's great to see this offense, guys, hasn't punted the ball in 2 straight weeks. This offense is humming. They face the Cardinals, who are top 10 in points allowed to running backs. Brian Robinson is a must start for me. Wasn't super efficient last week versus the Bengals, still got into the end zone. And anytime they're on the goal line, Brian Robinson is right there ready to roll. My RB17, Eckler, looked so good in this game, but he is in concussion protocol. And I don't know if he plays or not. Regardless, you can play Brian Robinson. On the opposite side of the ball, you can totally throw James Conner out there. Disappointing week in week 3, but Detroit is the best rushing defense in the NFL. I mean, they are really difficult. They're giving up the fewest points to running backs, so we kind of could have seen this one coming with James Conner, right? But keep in mind, in the first 2 weeks, James Conner averaged over 19 points per game. Now he faces the Commanders. This is the highest over-under of the week, 49.5 points. The Cardinals are favored. I don't know, in a couple days, that could change. Maybe the Commanders get a little bit more love, but this is a high over-under, 2 offenses that look pretty good, and 2 running backs that you can definitely play, no doubt about it. All right, the 11th matchup that we will look at here is the Patriots at the 49ers. Again, 2 teams, 1-2. That's right. The New England Patriots and the San Francisco 49ers have the same record, and that is why they play the games, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't get played on a spreadsheet or on a piece of paper, does it? Now, let's talk about this matchup. Ramondre Stevenson, I am going to label him a must start. Number one, the 49ers rush defense has not been that difficult this year. Right now, they're 11th in points allowed to fantasy running backs. They've been pretty stout, but it's a matchup that you have been able to exploit. Now, as far as Jordan Mason, his first disappointing week, he still almost gets 11 PPR points. I mean, you got to put this guy out there. He's averaging a high yards per carry on a good offense. And now he faces the Patriots, who are middle of the pack, and the 49ers are heavily favored in this one. This is by far the largest spread of the week. The 49ers implied team point total is over 30 points. The Patriots implied team point total is under 10. So definitely put Jordan Mason out there. He should bounce back in a huge way. In fact, he's a top 10 ranked running back for me in week 4. I get it if you're worried about Ramondre Stevenson, but friendly reminder, in the first 2 weeks, Ramondre Stevenson was averaging well over 18, 19 points per game. He was leading the league in total touches. He had that injury on Thursday Night Football versus the Jets, and they just never were able to recover. They were never in that game. So I definitely think Ramondre Stevenson is in play, at least for me. You guys let me know if you disagree, but man, imagine the Patriots beat the Niners. That would be chaos. All right, the 12th matchup we will look at is the Chiefs at the Chargers. We've got a 39.5 point over-under. The Chiefs are heavily favored. They are 8.5 point favorites on the road. Let's be honest, though. I've been to SoFi. There's not many Charger fans in there. It's pretty much a road game for them every time they play there. No disrespect intended. Look, I will label J.K. Dobbins a spot start. He is literally right on the edge of a spot start and a must start for me. This time last week, we made a video, players that could bust. J.K. Dobbins was on that video. We didn't like his matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, here's the good news for J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins in week number 3, even though it was bad, okay, bad matchup, he didn't get the fantasy points. But here's the good news. He played 65% of the snaps. That's a high this season. He had 18 total touches. That tied his high in week number 2. And Gus Edwards was relatively irrelevant. He was an afterthought. So J.K. Dobbins is a volume play this week. He's certainly not someone that you're excited to start, but you can put him out there. And I would say the same thing about Carson Steele, another volume play. He got 17 touches in his first appearance as the starter, played 62% of the snaps against a very difficult Atlanta rush defense. Now, the Chargers defense is legit. So I don't know. I mean, and we also have to keep in mind that Kareem Hunt didn't play last week. Could Kareem Hunt play a bigger role this week? It's certainly possible. So look, you can throw Carson Steele out there, but for both Steele and Dobbins, I would drastically limit my expectations in this week just because this is two defenses that have been able to shut down running backs in fantasy football. All right, the 13th matchup we'll look at is the Browns at the Raiders. Again, two teams that are 1-2. This is tied for the lowest over-under of the week with just 37.5 points across the board. I'm not really excited about this. The only name I think we can really talk about starting is Jerome Ford. He's my RB24. He's on the edge of a spot start and a must start. Here's the good news for Jerome Ford. Versus the Giants in week 3, he had a career high 79% of the snaps. He only touched the ball 14 times. To be fair to him, they had to throw the ball pretty much the entire game. Now, let me ask you guys, do you feel like they're going to be able to run the ball versus the Raiders? If so, then maybe Jerome Ford is a good play. That's why he's a spot start for me. But things are really confusing in Cleveland. The way they're using Foreman, the way they're using Ford, there's no consistency. It's back and forth. And I think Deonta Foreman could even have a role on the goal line. So limit your expectations. But it is a good matchup because the Raiders are third in points allowed to running backs. And as far as the Raiders, I don't know if I want to spend time on this because it will just turn into a rage session. And I don't know that I'm not sure I want to go back to that. It's not good for my mental health to talk about this backfield. All I will say is that Antonio Pierce, I will never trust you with anything, okay? You could tell me the sky is blue, Antonio Pierce, and I wouldn't believe you. I honestly would not believe you. Your words mean nothing to me. Zamir White, again, vultured on the goal line for a rushing touchdown from Alexander Mattison. It's actions over words for me with this Raiders backfield. I have no interest moving forward. Zamir White is not even a player I want to roster, to be honest with you. All right, the 14th matchup we'll look at. We got to Sunday Night Football here. That is Bills at Ravens. Two teams that are looking really good in week number 3. The Ravens beat the Cowboys. The Bills absolutely incinerate. Is that the right word? I mean, they destroyed, whatever the word is, they killed the Jaguars. It wasn't even close. Let's talk about the Ravens side of the ball. Derrick Henry, Durka, the king himself, RB6 on the year. In week 3, he goes off versus the Cowboys, averages over 6 yards per clip. He's stiff-arming dudes into the 5th dimension. I mean, he is back, and he is looking like a badass. I think we can all agree. So absolutely a must start. My RB6 on the week. The Bills are second in points allowed to running backs. Let's see if Derrick Henry can exploit that. And honestly, if I'm the Ravens, I would build my offense around Derrick Henry. Just keep letting him pound the rock. James Cook, of course, is a must start. Played really well in pretty much every week so far this year. He has paid off starting for you. The Ravens are a difficult matchup, but when you're on an offense that's attached to Josh Allen, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to score. We just know that's the case. That's what we've seen historically. 46.5 point over under. The Ravens are favored, by the way. So there could be a chance for a lot of fantasy points in this one. All right, the 15th matchup we'll look at is the start of the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Now, I have been harsh on the doubleheader Monday Night Football vibes. I've not been kind. I enjoyed it this week. Look, I am a Commanders fan, so obviously it was great watching Jaden Daniels do his thing. I don't know if I'm into it yet. It wasn't as bad as I remembered. Okay, that's what I'll say. It wasn't as bad as I remembered. What do you guys think? I don't know. Titans at Dolphins. Tennessee is one of the only teams in the NFL with no wins. There's only a handful of them. Tennessee, you did it. Let's start thinking about the 2025 NFL draft. But wait, you've got a cupcake matchup here. Tony Pollard is a must start. Dolphins are giving up the 5th most points to fantasy running backs, and their offense is atrocious without Tua tags. Maybe we see Tyler Huntley this week. I don't know, but regardless, this offense is struggling. Skylar Thompson looks lost. If I was Skylar Thompson, I would have put on a diaper before I went into that game because clearly he was scared, he was nervous, he was never comfortable. It looked like he was going to poop his pants every time he dropped back. Am I wrong? You tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't think I am. But we are starting Tony Pollard. Rough game for him. Last week versus the Packers, they could never establish the run. I think they will be able to this week versus the Dolphins. By the way, this game is tied for the lowest over-under, so let's keep that in mind as we talk about this matchup. But Devon Achane, his first disappointing game last week, I am still going to label him a must-start. I do think they will find ways, McDaniel will find ways to scheme him open and get him into the game plan. You're going to get a heavy dose of Achane regardless if Mostert plays or not. Two matchups where defenses are giving up top 10 points to fantasy running backs. And the last matchup for Monday Night Football, we've got Seahawks at Lions. The 3-0 Seattle Seahawks. Put some respect on Seattle's name. 47.5 point over under. The Lions are favored, and this is the second highest over under of the week. I mean, this is an exciting game. Like, this is what I feel like we saw from Commanders Bengals just then. There could be similar vibes with Seahawks Lions. I am very excited about this one. Okay, if Ken Walker is healthy and playing, you start Ken Walker. No questions asked. If Ken Walker is not playing, you start Zach Charbonnet. He's the RB7 on the season. Last 2 weeks, he's averaging around over 20 points per game as a starter for this team. Now, if Ken Walker plays, I would move Zach Charbonnet to my RB40. He would be a must sit for me. I just don't think that you can play him versus this difficult Detroit defense who gives up the fewest points to fantasy running backs. Now, for the opposite side of the ball, come on. We all know this. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, probably the best backfield in the NFL. You start both of these names, both top 12 running backs in fantasy football right now. David Montgomery, the RB8, Gibbs, the RB12. You got to start these guys. We know that. Hopefully there is a ton of points in this one on Monday Night Football. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching the video. Do me a favor, show some love by hitting that like button. Subscribe if you like the content. Last thing I'll say is if you have a difficult start sit question or a trade question that you need help with from us, very simply put, check out the pinned comment. There is a link to our website. You can ask us a question at any moment, and we'll be able to help you make the right decision heading into week number 4. I appreciate you watching. See you in the next one. Wide receivers are coming out later in the day. I got you guys with the double release. I'm working my ass off for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you very soon. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.